Maxime. I'm here to talk about leveraging threat intelligence to get to unlock additional funding for security. I'll be sharing some past experience, insights, and we'll have questions at the end of the session. So I'm the founder of Red Belt. We do size as a service, helping businesses with their cybersecurity strategy and everything. Also the size of Finder comparison website. All right, so agenda. I'll be talking about three things: the what, the who, and how. So literally, I'll be using threat intelligence to come up with a message, to have something to say, right? And then I'm gonna identify who I want to communicate the message to, and then I'm gonna define my strategy for communication, and I'll be using storytelling for that. Okay, so three main parts: the what, who, and how. All right, so threat intelligence area. Sure, you've seen these areas before. There are different use case for threat intelligence. You can use threat intelligence for strategical decisions to help you define strategy. You can use threat intelligence for improving your detection protection mechanisms. All right. You can also use threat intelligence for understanding threat actors TTPs. All right. And as well as to help prioritize vulnerabilities or risks. So different use cases, and today I'll talk about more the tactical and strategic area of threat intelligence. All right, so what weaknesses do we have in the context of the current threat landscape we face? Very important question. So I'll be using the threat intelligence here to identify threats to the business. There are different platforms you can use. Threat Connect, Anomaly, we got Feature, CrowdStrike, and many more, I'm sure. But the idea here is that you access some sort of intelligence. Could be reports, could be any kind of intelligence, but the goal is to identify threats to the business. So to be able to do that, for example, you can use the sector the company is operating in. Like for example, for this example today, I'll be using like a fintech company, all right, in Australia. So geographic location is also something you can use. Once you have your criteria, you can identify APTs, APT groups or threat actors. For example, APT 38, Lazarus. Once you have identified APTs, you can now jump on mapping the TTPs using the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So knowing how these guys get their foothold inside the organization, how they move laterally, how they exfiltrate data. So these techniques are well documented. Not saying all their techniques are documented, but majority of them. So then once you have that, once you know exactly what these guys would be doing if they target your company, you can assess your defense, detection and response capabilities. Okay, so by starting with listing the controls that you have in place, for example, phishing technique, what sort of email filtering you have in place. You can also assess the detection, like how quickly are you able to detect any phishing campaign, and assess your response capability as well, like how fast can you respond, contact stakeholders or people inside the company who would be responsible to respond to the incident. So these three main areas, defense, detection, and response, you need to know where you at literally against particular APT groups. Also, knowing that your detection capability is not super high won't necessarily be a deal breaker. That doesn't mean that next quarter that would be your top priority. All right, you need to do other things after, and I'll talk about what you need to do after. But knowing where you are at, again, these APTs or threat actors is very important. In this example, so by the way, you can see here the MITRE attack framework, and use colors as well to just to symbolize your maturity levels for each of these TTPs. So in this example also I took so I said, well, by way of example, domain authentication techniques, okay, regular training, awareness for employees, all good. However, yeah, basic capability in terms of email filtering. Because I know that this APT group would be targeting, would be leveraging phishing as a initial access tactic. Probably have to improve that that control, that defense capability of email filtering. So in here, in the example, initial access maturity, maybe 2 out of 5. So now I have the what. So literally, I have a message to communicate, right? The fact that the email filtering solution that we have at the moment is not super great, and there is a threat. There is a threat to the business that would eventually leverage that or exploit vulnerability or whatever. But the fact that my email filtering capability is a bit low, and the fact that my threat level is pretty high, it's not a good idea here. So who do we need to convince? Super important. The fact that my email filtering is not great, that's a fact, right? But like, what do you need? Who do you need to convince? And for what? So let's take that example of C-level executives. So the people who make decisions in the business, and because at the end of the day, I want to have an extra budget. I want to have a budget to get a better email filtering solution for the company. So I need to convince C-level executives there. Obviously, I won't going to use the same technique if I need to convince a C-level executive that I would use to convince my colleague, my CISO, or whatever. So that's why defining, identifying clearly who you want to communicate the message to is super important. The way you're going to communicate would be completely different then. So C-level executives, what do they care about, literally? They probably, by way of example again, most of them will value financial impacts of risks. You can't talk to them about risk, medium, likelihood, low, doesn't necessarily ring a bell for them. You have to understand how they think, what they like, what they're sensitive about, so you can then identify how you're gonna draft your communication. Again, by the way of example, I'll use a financial impact of risk because it worked for me in the past. That was something that resonates a lot for them, for the C-level executive, to talk about dollar figures, right? Not necessarily risk level or whatever. So how much money the business could lose because of various risks it faces. Okay, have a drink. So now we have the who. So we know who we're gonna communicate the message to. Now we have to think about how we're gonna communicate the message and an impactful story. And I mentioned story there because that's the idea. Idea is, and Bianca talked about that this morning earlier. we want to communicate a story. We want to, and I'll explain three main principles when you talk about when you tell a story. We don't want to simply communicate a message. We want to tell a story, so that resonates even more. Just to mention also, let's say you want to target or you want to, your audience would be C-level executive or CEO in companies. You also have to understand who would be around the table as well. So not only focus on one specific role or person around the table, you have to consider the other person, not necessarily the decision makers, but people that can influentiate the person you are targeting. It's super important not to escape and to just focus on one person. You have to consider who would be around the table when you're going to talk about the story. Going back to the how, this is the three main principles when you tell an effective storytelling. So first of all is know your audience. That's exactly what I was saying. You aren't gonna communicate the same way. It all depends of who you telling the story to. Okay, so different audiences have different interests. I'll zoom in for like in each of them after this slide, but I quickly want to go through the two others. Strive for simplicity is very important. If it's too complicated, you'll lose traction, you lose attention. So simplicity is very important. And engage the emotions. And we, thanks to Bianca, experienced something in regards to emotions this morning. Super important. I like this quote. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. Okay? The same, I'll be talking about this third principle in a sec. But talking about knowing your audience, so again, C-level executive value financial impact of risk. So let's talk about quantitative risk assessment and avoid talking about risk levels. So I'm sure you're familiar with the risk matrix 5x5. Okay, very common. So how about if we bring more context to it and have, we have data and system impact for data and system, impact for reputation. That's a simple way to explain a risk in plain English, with like avoiding talking about severities or levels. And today we'll be focusing on these two particular rows. So the financial impact of risk, and that's percentage of annual profit. So you can, it's just the beginning. Quantitative risk assessment can go way beyond that. You can use Monte Carlo simulation and a lot of different statistics methods to calculate risks. But this is a very simple way to start quantifying financial impact of risk. So having a percentage there, having a percentage of annual profit. The second column there is frequency. So instead of talking about likelihood possible, how about if we start talking about occur once every 2 or 5 years? Again, same principle, using plain English to explain a risk. So at the end of the day, I want to be able to do this. So it's highly probable that within the next 12 months, our business will be targeted by APT groups, potentially leading to 300,000 reduction in our profit. In response to this risk, I propose an exceptional allocation of $32,000 as an urgent measure to reinforce our email filtering solution. So you see the quantification of risk there. So instead of talking about likelihood possible, I talk about in the next 12 months. and I replace impact high by how much that would cost to the business. So that first part is literally the message, the problem, and that second part is literally the solution I'm proposing to the business to fix or to reduce the risk there. But I never mentioned any risk severity there because of my audience. All right. Strive for simplicity. So your audience may not have the technical background or even the time to listen at all the details. So have to be concise, has to be spot on, and have to avoid jargons and abbreviations that we have a lot in the industry. Simplicity is key. And the third one is engage the emotion. All right. So if I communicate a message, I want the people to have the impression that I have, or the feeling that I know what I'm talking about, and I have control of the situation. So I've identified the problem, I have a solution for it, all right? And I've also negotiated price in advance. So the price that I'm proposing, it's not just a number I throw. I've done my market assessment. I know which solution I want to use. I've talked to the vendor, negotiated price, and again, the price that I'm proposing, that the budget, the extra budget that I want to have, it's based on data, research, and everything. So I want them to feel I'm in control of the situation. I don't want them to feel scared or uncertain about my ability to understand what's going on. When I'm gonna leave the room, I don't want them to feel scared about the situation. I want them to feel okay. So I think he understands the problem, and let's make some calculation and everything. So we can then see if we can allocate an extra budget. But I'm confident that the budget that Maxime proposed, for example, is spot on. All right. So emotions is very important. At the end of the day, we are all human. So even if that's the CEO or whatever, president, or it's a human, so it's interactions between humans. That sort of advice that's also applicable for daily life. If you want to convince someone, it's better to understand the person in front of you, so you can draft the message and make them feel convinced by what you're saying. So now we have the how. So we have the message, we have the audience, and we have how. So at the end of the day, that's exactly what happened there. You can see in the left side, so the threat intelligence, identifying threats to the company. Using the pointer. Threats to the company, then mapping the TTPs, assessing defense detection and response capability. So I have maturity levels there. That's just a message. Let's say today I talked about defense capability a bit low, right? Then we have the people we want to convince, C-level executives in our example this morning. What do they value? And also the message I'm gonna draft for our C-level executives. I think I'm very early. I think I've got, maybe you have questions, but so that's hopefully that helps you understand the approach generally on risk management, and also identifying threats to the business, drafting messages and everything.
Thanks, Maxime.
Thank you.
Got questions?
Question for, you said when we present to executives, it's best to have a good idea of how much it's going to cost us to fix the problem and talk to the vendors beforehand. What would you recommend if your procurement process dictates that basically you're not allowed to talk to vendors until you have approved funding, and basically you've already got that funding approved, which makes it very difficult to determine how much it's going to cost you to fix a problem or how much you know it'll cost, because you can't talk to the vendor until after the funding's been approved.
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, different approaches, I would say. So, some pricing, you can get high-level pricing from vendors without going through an intense negotiations and stuff. Some pricing are just public, or by talking with your peers, you might have an idea of the budget you'll need to get the new email filtering solution. Um, you can also explain that having the procurement team in between, so you is a blocker for you. So maybe find a way to work differently. That could be a possibility as well if that's too much of a blocker. Um, yeah, but I think it's that was just an example. Again, you can get publicly available like pricing to have an idea, or you can stop the message to this is the impact, the financial impact of the risks. I have a solution, but maybe no idea about the cost of the solution. I have a range, but no any like particular price or anything. So maybe your goal would be to being able to start engaging conversation with vendor. So you change the purpose of the thing, but yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. I guess in today's society of an age where we're seeing 0 days every other week, nation states, activists, and you name it. I mean, how do you go about prioritizing what story to tell to the executives? Otherwise, you'd probably be going back every other week with a different story, right? Or does it come back to sort of your threat modeling and guess what's important for your business?
Yeah, you've mentioned it, like risk assessment in general or threat modeling. That's key. You can't just see what vulnerability scans come up with, or the 0 days new 0 days that are affecting. You have to use your risk management program to assess the risk to the business, and because at the end of the day, it's just an information that there is a 0 day affecting one of your product. You have to consider controls that you have in place that could maybe prevent the execution of the vulnerability, or so you'll have compensating controls. Um, Different other things you have to consider, but yeah, you for sure you can't go back every week, every third day to your CEO and asking for an increase of your budget. It can happen time to time if there's an urgent need, but no, I think I would recommend to set up some regular catch up with your C-level executive or manager or whatever, so you have an opportunity, a window to talk to them about something that happened. However, if there's something urgent, yeah, you need to have a way to request attention on a ad hoc basis. Yeah.
Maxime, thank you for the talk. I have a question about the metrics, the 5x5 metrics on the slides. What is the source of this metrics? Because I think it's a very high risk for death, which is accepted. The metrics, if I read it correctly, was the low risk if there's one death in 10 years. And if we test components, for example, in this industry, then we have one death in 10 in the power of 8 years, which is a software reliability we need at minimum.
Again, all the information you have to contextualize all the information and apply the data to your business. So it needs to be adjusted based on your business and everything. It was just I was mentioning about the approach and having plain English for each of the all different sort of impacts to people, to systems, to reputations and stuff like that. again, content in each section. Yeah, it's really up to your business to adjust the cursor. You have to have conversation with your financial team to make sure the percentage of in the financial row are accurate. You want to base your the impact on annual profits. How do you want to base that on cost of data breach? Or there are many ways, but the idea was to start introducing or talking about the context and plain English that needs to be used more in the industry.
And what is the origin of this specific metrics? Is it a ISO standard or something like
I'll
that?
send you the link, the source, if
okay.
you're interested. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If I could interject, the 5x5 metric is a in most large organizations, this is your enterprise risk management framework that was created for the organization. It was created based on the risk appetite of the board or senior management. So those words and everything will change. I think the best driving point that Maxime is making here is that in a lot of organizations, we tend to just go in there and go, this is a high risk, or this is a medium risk, or this is a low risk. I think the very key point that Maxime is bringing out is don't use the high, medium, low. It means nothing to them, right? Convert this into a word, into a story that they can understand. Because a lot of times when you go, this is a high risk, right? Everyone's just going to start going, oh, whoa, okay, but we do this and we do that, and we, don't, right? Just avoid it and follow the art of storytelling and use words instead of that rating. That's right. So, but the ERMF is what it is, and organizations tend to have that defined for you.
So back to it earlier. So the main point is for to actually get into like the main point of the story and like to quantify it. Is that the case?
Point here is to show the importance of knowing who you're talking with, so then you can have the right communication strategy. In that particular example, because I knew that my CEO was considering a lot the financial impact of risk, so I used the quantifying approach to assess risk. But the overall message is that know who you're talking to, and then have the right message.
So the main message depends on who you're talking.
Exact. Yeah.
Yeah, and like quantitative as well. Like the
in that
financial
particular
figures.
use case, quantitative risk assessment was a good option for me. Yeah.
Just one more there.
See, they always are very far apart from each other.
Yeah, there's a nice cozy corner out here. No, I just wanted to add to what you responded to him. So in terms of quantifying the risk, it's not always possible to give the exact number, but that is where the risk matrix comes into picture, where you say if you have a high risk, which talks about a high financial impact, which could be a range. It could be a 2 million to 5 million range, or it could be 1 million to 2 million range. So that is where that number is important. And that is how you can talk to your senior stakeholders, essentially. So, yeah, because every time you cannot say this is going to be 3.2 million loss exactly. So that is kind of difficult. So that's why the risk matrix comes into picture.
Yeah. And good point. It's just estimation at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Can't be very accurate. The same for likelihood in terms of the next 12 months. It's
exactly,
and it's why I left. It's highly probable that within the next probable. So. Still talking about likelihood level.
That's right. Even the likelihood, I think the other person asked the question of likelihood once every 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. This all depends on what your technical security controls are in place and what exposure your systems have. So that kind of determines the likelihood as well.
And you understand risk management, risk assessment. They understand that it's purely estimations and
that's right. I mean, and thanks for your presentation as well. Thank you.
Thanks.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much,
Thanks a lot.
Maxime.